Hello Art 1 students. This video is for both sections, 4th hour and 6th hour. I'm going to give you some basic principles of watercolor painting as we enter into our watercolor unit together virtual. In this tutorial I'm just going to give you some guiding vocabulary words and principles, and the next one, which I'll post after I make it here in a few minutes, will be an actual practice together demonstrating some of these principles. So first of all, if you think that watercolors are an amateur or childish medium, you're wrong. You can do some wonderful things with watercolors. Here's some student examples just from this year, Art 2, of some very nice landscape paintings. This one's Jessica Keating's, this one's Christian Evans, and I've shown you some other ones in class that are really nice and easy to make good work with. The key here, one of the major keys that you need to drive this whole thing, is patience. This is not like the tempera and acrylic paints that you guys were just using. It's a very watery medium. The paint mixes with the water. It's very light, and you have to let it dry between the layers, okay? So number one rule, patience. Okay. Number two, it is all about layering. You're going to be building layers. You have to let it dry between the layers. Let it dry between the layers. Okay? Some professional watercolor artists will even use a hair dryer. If you guys have a hair dryer at home, you won't have to wait as long for it to dry. But the reason why we work on several small ones at the same time is so that you can start on one, do a layer, and then let it dry as you move on to another one. So you're working on the other one without thinking about that first one. Pretty soon it's dry and you can build on the layers again. So that's very important. Also, you want to work from light to dark. Generally, you do not want to start with your dark colors first, because you can't paint over them once they're on there. You can't really erase them very easy. So you want to work light, and then you build to your darker colors. So light to dark. And lastly, you want to make sure that you work from your background to your foreground, okay? So what I mean by background is your sky. What I mean by foreground is what is up closest to us. All successful landscapes generally have three parts. They have a background, which is the sky. Okay, that's your background. They have a middle ground, which is where your horizon is. All right, so that's middle. That's supposed to say middle. And then you have a foreground, which is what's here in the front. So there's three basic parts, okay? You do not want to start in the foreground, and you do not want to do what's called bottoming out, which is when people will erase their foreground. Basically, they just make like a horizon line and a background, and the bottoms of their painting have no sense of space. The foreground gives us a sense of space. You can see in both of these successful landscape paintings, there's all three elements. There's background, middle ground, which is the horizon. Sometimes you have multiple, I guess what you could call horizons. Technically that's the only horizon, but you might have several layers of rock or mountains or hills. For example, right here you have, this is the middle ground. This is kind of the middle ground too, but this is the foreground. So it leads the viewer's eye into the painting. So don't forget those three elements. You should have chosen some while you were here. Those of you guys that are in quarantine, when we left, you're going to have to get some examples from the internet. Just look up watercolor paintings. It's way better if you go from a watercolor painting of a landscape. We are studying landscapes. Don't be getting pictures of birds and things like that yet. We might move into that, but let's begin with landscapes. They're very easy to be successful with. watercolor paintings of landscapes. Also, you're going to need to prepare with some watercolor paper. You guys that were here the day before we left, you should have these. You should have 4 pieces taped on to one board, and you should also have a fifth piece. Here's like 4 pieces taped onto one. This one already has some paint on it, obviously. Here's the 5th piece. Some of you guys taped them onto the back. Some of you guys that I sent stuff home, look for that extra piece on the back. We're going to be doing that together. When you tape them with just regular old masking tape, don't tape over the whole entire thing. Just tape a very small border and try to keep it straight. If you guys don't have watercolor paper, you can use a good piece of sketchbook paper, but it will try to buckle and wrinkle on you when we use the water. It'd be really good if you could get some watercolor paper. I can send some home. Just email me. We can figure out a time for you to get the paper. Someone can take it to you if you have a sibling in the elementary school, something like that. Or you can go buy some. You're also going to need a set of watercolors. We'll talk about that in a second when I do the tutorial on the actual painting. So get set up. We're going to do this one together. See how I'm taping it to a nice border. Get your watercolor paints. Get you a cup of water and a watercolor brush. And I'll see you in a few minutes so we can start painting together.